When Governor Arthur Phillip left Sydney in 1792, he left behind a ragged settlement on the edge of survival. But over the next 8 years, that settlement would begin to grow into something else, a colony, a place of law, trade, conflict, and ambition. This is the story of how a penal outpost started becoming a society. Governor Phillip had held the colony together through storms, starvation, and the threat of collapse. When he sailed home in December 1792, the population was just under 4,000. Convicts, guards, officers, free settlers. The people left behind faced uncertainty. Who would lead? Who would enforce justice? Into the void stepped the New South Wales Corps, a military force tasked with guarding convicts. But now, with no governor above them, they saw a chance for more. They took over administrative duties, began influencing trade, and extended their power far beyond military ranks. Without oversight, the officers of the Corps began blurring the lines between soldiers and rulers. It was an undeclared coup of quiet paperwork and shifting roles, and it would shape the course of the colony. Without a stable currency, the colony turned to barter, and in that void, one commodity emerged as more valuable than any other: alcohol, specifically rum. The New South Wales Corps quickly seized control. They imported spirits in bulk, stored them in guarded warehouses, and used them to fund their own economic system. Rum was used to pay wages, to settle debts, to bribe officials, and to secure favours. It infiltrated every level of colonial life. This rum currency fed corruption. It gave the Corps a stranglehold on power, and it shaped the nature of governance in ways that would be difficult to untangle. If the Rum Corps was the body of power in the colony, John MacArthur was its mind. A veteran of the Corps and an astute businessman, MacArthur accumulated land, livestock, and influence. He saw the vast plains beyond Sydney not as wilderness, but as potential. MacArthur imported merino sheep and began experimenting with wool production. His vision extended beyond personal wealth. He aimed to build a pastoral empire, one that would eventually supply Britain itself. He challenged authority whenever it threatened his plans. When reprimanded, he appealed directly to London. When denied land, he schemed to replace his opponents. MacArthur's methods were aggressive, but they were effective, and they set the tone for how politics would operate in the young colony. As the colony's population grew, so did its hunger for land. From 1793 onward, more convicts were being freed, more settlers were arriving, and more land was needed for crops and livestock. The Hawkesbury region became a hotspot. Its fertile soil was ideal for farming, and it was heavily occupied by Aboriginal clans. The expansion sparked resistance. Farms were raided, livestock stolen, settlers attacked. In return, patrols were launched. Entire camps were destroyed. This was not an isolated frontier clash, it was the beginning of a sustained conflict, the beginnings of the frontier wars. At the heart of this resistance was a man named Pemulwuy. A Bidjigal warrior and spiritual leader, Pemulwuy refused to accept British occupation. He led attacks on settlements, military patrols, and crops. He became a symbol of defiance, unyielding, unpredictable, and impossible to catch. In 1802, Pemulwuy was finally killed. His head was severed and sent to England in a jar, a chilling symbol of imperial pride. But resistance would not die with him. It simply went underground. The frontier wars would last another 100 years. For the average convict or settler, life in the colony was a mix of hardship and hope. Convicts toiled under hard labour, but if they survived their sentence, they had a chance at land. Women bore the brunt of domestic life and scarcity. Many ran small businesses or worked farms beside their husbands. Some married officers, others simply survived. Children grew up in dirt-floored houses, spoke in a colonial dialect, and learned from both European and Aboriginal worlds. This wasn't England. It wasn't meant to be. It was something new, a raw, chaotic society taking shape on the edge of empire. In 1795, Governor John Hunter arrived. A naval officer with integrity, Hunter aimed to restore order and bring transparency to the colony's administration. He encountered fierce resistance. The Rum Corps ignored his commands. MacArthur defied him openly. Officers operated as if they were untouchable, and in many ways, they were. Hunter tried to clean up land grants. He encouraged agriculture. He introduced civilian oversight. But corruption was too entrenched. By 1800, exhausted and politically outmaneuvered, Hunter asked to be recalled. As the colony matured, so too did its institutions. Religious leaders like Reverend Samuel Marsden promoted not just faith, but discipline. Often called the flogging parson, Marsden blended sermons with strict order. Law courts evolved from ad hoc arrangements into more structured proceedings. Magistrates began holding sway in remote districts, and education slowly spread. Children learned to read and write, some were taught Latin, others farming, the first stirrings of a new generation with roots in Australian soil. By the turn of the century, the population of New South Wales had doubled. The settlement was no longer a temporary prison, it was a permanent colony. Roads stretched inland, farms dotted the horizon, and a new sense of identity was forming. But the battles over power, corruption, and governance were far from over, because in just a few short years, the colony would face its most dramatic crisis yet. From 1792 to 1800, Sydney transformed from a struggling outpost into a society. But as the 19th century began, power struggles deepened. The Corps would not go quietly, and John MacArthur was not done. The next governor would face them head-on. His name? William Bligh. The conflict that followed would shake the colony to its core. As power festers and the Rum Corps tighten their grip, one man will try to bring them down. Governor William Bligh arrives with orders from the Crown and no patience for corruption. But when Bligh takes on the Rum Corps, the colony explodes.